Okay. Okay. Just waiting for people to show up. Well, I should have a little dance that I do at the beginning just to just wait for people to show up. They know that this is the trailer at the beginning.
Got people now.
I've got people now. So I also have people behind the camera today. Today I have two cousins, not just one. I have two. So glad everyone's here. Always interested to find out where you're tuning in from, how far around the world you are. So this week I asked on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube for some questions. So I do have a couple of questions prepared before you actually ask them. One of the very first questions I was asked, and this is a simple one, what do I do with my old needles and rotary blades? So my needles, I keep this clear pill box, and I have a little hole in the top so that when I use a needle or whatever, I just push it through here. If it's not big enough, I will open up the lid, and when I have it full, then I throw that out. For my rotary cutters, I have two containers. I buy my new ones, and I put them in my new, and I take them off, and then I put them in the old. And when this is full, I take them all out, I wrap them in paper, and then I dispose of them responsibly. Just a note, when you're changing your rotary blade, take off your rotary blade and put it in the old before you open up your new, because it's amazing how often they can get mixed up. Somebody also asked me a question about a rotary blade, saying that she's just put on a new one and it's not cutting anything. When the rotary blades come, they're packed with a little bit of oil in between the two of them, and through travel and time, they can really stick together. So chances are you have two rotary blades stuck together, and they're a little bit tricky to get apart without damaging the blade. But give it a go. But that's most likely what your problem is.
So there's people from all over. There's people from North Carolina, Memphis. There's some from Virginia. We got Texas in here, Quebec,
oh, wow.
Edmonton. They're all over.
Excellent, excellent. I was also asked, what are my favorite rulers? Now, my favorite rulers I actually have hanging on the wall, and that was one of the best decisions I ever made, was to put them on the wall. They're just hanging there nice and neatly, and then I can easily see which ones are lost in my room, and I can put them back. My current favorite one is this one. This is 2.5 inches by 18, and I just use this all the time. I use it when I'm dealing with scraps. It's just easy to get my hand around, and this is my go-to. These ruler companies, especially OmniGrid, they make rulers for a number of different people that need rulers, like scrapbookers and things like that. So when you're buying rulers, I would advise to find the ones that have that extra 1/2 inch that us quilters need, because it'll make your life a whole lot easier when you're trimming up. The other thing is you have to be careful not to overbuy your rulers. Otherwise, you'll have a collection of ones like this just sitting in your drawer, maybe used once. With these specialty rulers, I would get together with your friends and make up a library that you can exchange these ones.
So you don't have a pile in your drawer doing nothing.
Ginny, my old... Ginny is in the house. I'm glad you're here, Ginny. Ginny was in
my old
Stony Creek Guild that I used to belong to, and I really miss my friends from the Stony Creek.
Have you ever tried sharpening the blades?
I haven't. I've looked at buying one of those sharpeners. I've asked a number of people, and they say, yes, you do get a couple more uses out of them. They don't last forever. And I'm just going third party here. This is what they told me. You can probably get them to sharpen maybe 2 or 3 times, and then you have to throw those ones out. So it's an expensive device. I've looked into them. They're between $50 and $80. So maybe one day I'll get one. No more other questions. Okay, favorite rulers. Somebody asked me, what fabric you can use when you quilt. Somebody was in a Joann's store the other day, and the Joann's people said you can use any fabric, but she thought you could only use quilting fabric. Well, the truth is you can use any fabric in a quilt. It doesn't matter what kind of fabric. You can use anything from cotton to leather. It's your choice. The trick is it's more difficult to use other fabrics, and the reason why we use quilting cotton is because that's easiest and you get the best results from it. Once you start getting into stretch fabrics, once you get into fabrics with a nap, or they're slippery like satin or silk, they're just much more harder to use. I use lame in a quilt, and I wanted to shoot myself by the time I was finished. It was so tricky to use, but anything goes. I love velvet in quilts. I love satin in quilts. So it's just up to your skill level. So if you're a beginner, I would start with
Quilting cotton. A viewer asked
me what my weekly chores are. I did a video a couple of weeks ago about
using your timer. One of the main chores that I do is every Friday I set my timer to clean up.
Log timer, and I just flip it over. You just put the time that you want on top and just clean up. Usually at the end of the week, my room is a disaster area, whether
If I've been sewing up a storm or
not, because it has a tendency to be a dumping space for everything that comes in the house. So I take 30 minutes and I tidy it up, and that normally means I have
a clean room to sew all weekend.
So every day I clean my machine. That goes without fail every day that I'm using it. And I've already mentioned these ones in the video. Every month I have a session where I clean up my scraps. I have a bucket that I keep just behind my sewing machine that I just fill with scraps. And once a month I go through.
And I just set my timer for whatever time I have. Normally it's 30 minutes.
And I just work through them. And another thing that I do once a month, but not the same day, on another day, is I have a bucket where the fabric that I've used or I've acquired that month goes in, and I take 30 minutes and I try to put it all away. Every week I change my needle. Now, if I have not sewn or had the opportunity to quilt that week, I may not change my needle, but definitely, I think the rule is every 8 hours or every 3 bobbins you should change your needle, but you notice a difference.
I have a drawer here filled with rotary cutters in a variety of sizes.
One rotary cutter that I change every week, and then I'll use the other one for cutting things like
batting or paper,
or things that are rougher and harder on the needle.
I had a viewer write in telling me that when she cut denim,
it seems to make her rotary blade sharper, but I haven't had a chance to take that theory for a test drive yet, so I'm going to try that.
So how do you feel about quilt shops that have set up block of the month? Do you have to buy different items every month to do blocks?
There's different blocks of the month. So the idea behind a block of the month is that there's a kit that you buy every single month. Some shops have a sewing session that goes with that as well. So there's 2 parts of that. One is that they get to sell you product, and 2, you get a surprise, or it feels like a gift in the mail once a month. So it's a win-win. It's not necessarily, trying to say this the right way, it's not necessarily the most economic way to do it, and often they will they're showing you a technique that you might need to buy some other tools to go with it. So before you choose to do a block of the month, just take a look through and just see what your costs are going to be. And that's part of your decision whether you join in. But the camaraderie of everyone doing a block of the month, it's often part of a bigger block of the month program. That shop will not be the only one running that program, so you'll have access possibly to a Facebook group or an Instagram feed. And I'm always about community, meeting other quilters.
You clean your cutting mat.
How do I clean my cutting mat? Actually, I showed this in a video a couple of videos ago of what to do with your batting scraps. There's the scraping off of whatever, sorry, my cutting mat I was talking about after I had cut up batting. But the cleaning, I'm trying to. So there's another woman that did it. I'm sorry. I um, use an eraser to get up any pieces of fluff from your batting scraps, and I believe just using a mild soapy solution is the trick to getting it clean, the other things off. Another question: thread tension. How do you deal with thread tension? Every sewing machine is different. So make sure you look up your sewing manual. But the biggest thing is don't be afraid of it. I was very afraid of sewing tension for many years. We're always sort of don't touch that dial type thing. But I have found that it's very important for you to play with it. Roll that dial from one side to the other. And what you're trying to do is just get that perfect balance between the upper thread and the lower thread. You're wanting to get that where they catch together right in the middle. If you find that you have tension issues, it could be your needle. It also could be your thread that you're using. Your thread is too large for your needle, or the needle is not large enough for the type of fabric that you're using. So take a look at those three things with tension. Organizing fabric. Somebody asked me, how do I organize my fabric? I actually showed that in my last Q&A. I organize it by color, but I suggest to everybody to organize the fabric the way that your brain works. Like you may prefer to organize it by size, the size of the pieces. I like to see it by color. So if you're interested in how I do it, go back and watch the last Q&A.
A couple questions. So first one, who's your helper today?
Oh, I've got Taylor, and in the back giving some emotional support is Zaddy. Both of them are my cousins.
Another question. I'm a fairly new quilter, and I'm having a hard I'm a new quilter, and I'm having a hard time keeping a consistent quarter-inch seam or quarter seam. I check every one, and when they're off, I fix them.
I have a video all about this called How to Sew Straight. I recommend you go back and watch that. Sewing is a skill that gets easier as you become more experienced, kind of like driving a car.
Once you're more experienced, it's a lot easier to stay in the middle of the road. Do a tester before you start, and just be mindful of use the sewing ledge. I swear by the sewing ledge with the masking tape, and just be more kinder to yourself. That
it will come with time.
The muscle memory to feed everything through evenly. Okay. So Taylor has just told me that we're having problems with our internet connection. We are going in and out. So if you miss anything here, everything's being recorded on my camera.
And you can watch it later on
YouTube later in the day. So.
Okay. This actually next question is from Ginny. Do you start and complete one quilt at a time, or do you have more than one quilt going at a time?
I have more than one quilt going at a time, and that's partly the way that my brain works. The first time I met a woman that
only worked on one quilt at one time,
beginning to end, I was just in shock. I couldn't believe anybody could do that, but that's the way that her brain worked. There's different parts of the process that I like. I like designing. I like cutting. I like making blocks. I really do not like sewing those blocks together and then doing all the binding and that part. All my fun is that I have is at the beginning.
So I have to shift my brain.
So I have to gather momentum to get that last stage done. I also have lots of projects that are different sizes. So I make a lot of baby quilts for that charity at St. Mike's. And now I'm doing YouTube videos, so there's lots of pieces and videos that I'm making too. But I enjoy working with more than one project at a time. I think I've got 4 lined up on my sewing board over here, so that's where I am right now. Yeah, I work with more than one. Okay, I had a woman write me saying that her father's just passed away and that she's having difficulty getting back into sewing. What can she do? I advise anyone who's suffered some kind of trauma like
to not push yourself.
If you had just broken I always try to use a physical analogy when we're dealing with mental health
because we can see it. So if you have broken
your leg, you would not be asking, how can I run a marathon this month? It's just, you can see that that's impossible. And that's the same thing that you have to do with your mental health. To sew a quilt, you need the mental energy
To sit in a chair and do
to do a marathon of work. And you just can't do that when you've suffered a loss. When you've suffered a loss, your brain likes to go into the past, it likes to go into the future, it likes a very tactile experience.
So sewing is just not an activity that you're good at the moment.
Sewing that, so give yourself permission to take some time. It would be a good time to get into
Your fabrics and organize them, or perhaps
go through that lost person's clothing and maybe think about making a memory quilt and just letting yourself be. Don't put the pressure on yourself to get in before you need to. When you feel a little bit better, start with some simple projects. Start with a baby quilt or a mug rug, or just little projects that you can finish and complete, so you don't, because healing is not a straight line. So when that sadness overcomes you, you've at least created a smaller project. You don't have to worry about a big project that you have to put aside and becomes a UFO. So my advice is, please be kind to yourself.
If I put sewing tape on my machine, I tend to put the tape on an angle. By the time I come down a couple of inches, how do I keep it straight? And the tape then covers my bobbin covers. So it means I am lifting it to change bobbins. Suggestion. Sorry, does that make sense?
I think you're talking about the masking tape ledge. You just have to. There's other things that you can use. You can use your ruler to help you square it out properly.
put your ruler underneath your pressure foot, preferably with the needle up, and align it on that 1/4 inch mark.
Yeah, you've got lines on your sewing plate, and just square up that ruler to those lines and then put down your ledge. Yes, if your bobbin is in the front, you're going to lift it up and put it back down. But I find mine is tacky enough that I can use it probably for about 2 weeks before I have to make another one. So you're just going to make some more. You may, because that line will change with what fabric you're using. Sometimes you'll be moving it
32nd of an inch.
every time you sew because your fabrics are just different. But you could put down with a fine Sharpie, put down a line so at least approximately you know how it's square, and then just adjust it to and from that line.
Other than baby quilts, what do you do with all your finished quilts?
I give them away. People ask me for a trunk show, and I'm desperate to find quilts because I'm always giving my quilts away. And that's what I do. I'm always making a quilt with somebody in mind so that when it's done, it goes to that person. I've already answered that one. Dust buildup. Somebody asked about how to maintain the dust in their, keep the dust down in your room. I answered this in my last Q&A as well. You can't. You just have to be more efficient at cleaning it. Cotton just produces dust. As a quilter, the two main things in your house that produce dust are toilet paper and quilting cotton. You get it off your batting, you get it off your fabrics, it comes off your threads. It's everywhere. So you just have to start some good tidying up habits. My husband bought an iRobot to vacuum the floor, but they don't get into the corners or on the baseboards or anything like that. So again, put a timer on your phone, and once a week, give a good 15 minutes to tidy up the dust. That's the way to keep it under control.
We have a comment actually on from one of our folks. She says, great advice about loss of loved ones. My daughter died about a year and a half ago. I started making pillowcases, also hand quilting on a panel for my son, with my son's help, I guess. Be kind to yourself. It takes time. Blessings.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I have a close friend who lost a daughter last year, and it's tough. It is just so tough. I try to support her every way I can, but she's living with it. So Thank you for sharing. How to audition free motion patterns before you quilt. Angela Walters talks about this amnesia that we have when we begin to free motion. We forget everything we've ever learned. And I try to avoid getting into a position where as soon as I finish the quilt top, I have to quilt the top. Because you have to switch gears. It's just, again, another mental game that you have to play. You've got to switch gears into another place. Good idea is to have a library of previously done designs so that you have something to go back and start triggering it. I have a couple of books that I like to go to as well. But before I start doing something more than just a straight line quilting, I have two things that I like to do. This is a small scale. I actually have this in a much bigger scale. I have a foam board, and I went to Fabricland and bought a piece of vinyl plastic that I think it was 3-ply. It's just a heavy piece that goes over top. So you can put your work underneath it. This is just a handout. So, and you can take your marker and just take it for a test drive. And you can just decide, am I going to do this pattern? And then you can actually also figure out whether you've got a path through. You can practice your path through. And if you don't like it, you can just simply wipe it off and then start again. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is I have a big pad. I just bought this from the dollar store. And you just practice and practice and practice because you're trying to build up this muscle memory. And you can use even the same sheet over and over again. These were done with pink, but then I'll go over them and do them with a darker color, and then a darker color, and then a darker color. So trying not to waste. Yeah, so just practice your... So you can see I just practiced. And this is just doodling. It's glorified doodling. But again, it helps you get into that frame of mind that you need for free motion quilting.
We're going to pause.
Okay. One of the things that are coming up in the new year is I'm starting a book club for quilters. And our first book is going to be Gemology by Andrea Sang Jackson. So if you are looking for a Christmas gift for yourself, grab one of these. This is an excellent book. I can't wait to review it.
A viewer asked,
how do you take a clear, beautiful picture of your quilt? Well, you need pictures of your quilt for a couple of different reasons. One, when you're doing it for show, you need a particular style of quilt picture. And then when you're just trying to show off your quilt, you need a particular type of quilt picture. And they're two very different shots. The one for a quilt show has to be totally flat, so you want to do it against a wall. And you need to have some good lighting. And the second shot, there's a wonderful video when I put it on YouTube, I'm going to put it in the notes because it's done by a professional quilter and it tells you all the points. You don't want any hands on it. You don't want it on an angle. It has to be square, and he explains it very well. Now, if you're just wanting to get a good picture of your quilt, a little thought has to go into it. You don't just stand up and say, oh, I'm going to take the best picture possible. You want good light. Natural light is very good for a quilt. You want to have some accessories possibly that will help. But the real tricky thing about a quilt is that a quilt reads differently depending on the distance away from it. You have a quilt looks different when you look at it up close. You can see all the details in the fabric and the fussy cutting and everything. And then you can, when you hold it
farther away, the contrast in the pattern begins to have an effect.
And then there's the picture of the quilt when it's far across the room. And it's a third quilt. You watch the patterns and the colors play together. And it can look very, very different at different areas. So the best way is you want to have light coming in on an angle so that you can get some of the texture of your quilting, and you want to have lighting that emphasizes the colors that you've chosen. So you would probably want a different light if you use low value light colored fabrics than if you use very bold colors, and then high contrast and low contrast. So planning is key to getting the rest. But we see online people trekking through the woods and posing with quilts by waterfalls and things like that. So you can have a lot of fun with it too.
Another question here. I'm fairly new. When to starch and when to steam? I've received different information.
So beginner quilters are often advised not to steam because it has a very permanent way of distorting the fabric if it's done wrong. So if it's dry, you have more chance of recovering from any mistakes. I have done a video on a really good ironing technique is what I called it, and that will really help you on the right way and the wrong way of when to press and how to press. I swear by it. It's the biggest difference in my quilting. The technique that I had the biggest change while I was learning to quilt. So I recommend you follow it. Starch is a different thing. Starch is about you have your fabrics going this way and you have your fabrics going this way. And when you cut them, starch provides a scaffolding to hold them in place and stop them from distorting. So it depends on where you're using them, and it depends on when you're using them. And it actually depends on geographically, because some people say that starch attracts insects if you live in a humid climate. So possibly not the best thing to use, but
It's different if you pre-wash your fabrics or not pre-wash your fabric.
if your fabrics are not washed, there's already a lot of sizing and starch in your
Fabrics, when you wash your fabrics, all that starch
that comes out. So you need to put some starch back into it. So I'm not giving you any specific answers because there isn't a specific answer. As a beginner, this is your time to experiment and figure out what you like and what works for you, because we're all different. So some people find starching an extra stage, and some people love it. So it's up to you and your journey as a quilter.
When working on a rag quilt, I have thick material to work with. Is it better to hand stitch around it, or can I pass through it with my regular pressure foot?
You can pass through it with your regular presser foot, but make sure you're using a large enough needle. So the larger the number, the stronger the needle. And you've got to be careful that you're not rushing through, because your needle has to go down and then it has to come up. And if you push it too much, it will snap. But use a quilting needle, and I would recommend using at least a 90 for a rag quilt. Other quilting channels. Well, there's the Missouri Creek. There is Jordan Fabrics. The question is, what other quilting channels do I watch? And I actually don't watch a lot, except when I need, on a regular basis, I watch them as I need to watch them, like probably you do. So if I need to learn a specific technique, I will Google it and watch probably 2 or 3 different channels. But channels that I watch on a regular basis would be Angela Walters, her free motion sewing techniques. There is, I hate to say it because I'm just terrible with names, but there's a woman not too far away from me. I'm going to hate myself afterwards for getting this wrong. Anyways, I will remember it and I will put it in the notes. I do like to watch channels from other crafts. I find they're inspiring, and I bring back into quilting a lot of different ideas. So cross-stitching, crocheting, felting, cooking, shipbuilding. There's a lot of different creative channels which I like to watch, and then bring it back in. Let me see. Do I always make a label for a quilt? Actually, I very rarely make a label for a quilt. I will put a person's name in or the name of the quilt in the binding, but I'm just getting to that point where I realize I probably need a label within my quilts. So there's lots of very creative ways. Certainly, if you put the few that I've had go on exhibition, I've had to put a label in. So it's just, I think one of the main problems with the labels is it's just that extra step after I consider that I have finished the quilt, and I just don't want to be dealing with that same project anymore. I want to go on to something else.
Two people have commented, do you mean so very easy?
So very easy. Thank you so much. She's wonderful. She has these, sometimes they're projects, sometimes they're very helpful hints, but right after I did my video on batting scraps, she had a wonderful video on how to clean your mat. Go watch that. It's excellent.
Is there a trick to add a 1-inch square to a 2.5 square corner and get it to come out square? I think I'm doing it right, but it doesn't always square up.
Would you mind just repeating that question again?
Yeah. Is there a trick to add a 1-inch square to a 2.5 square corner and get it to come out square? I think I'm doing it right, but it doesn't always square up. That's the way she wrote it. Unless you want Kathy to rephrase it and ask it again.
Yeah, could you just rephrase that? I don't understand. Are we got a 2.5 inch strip and a 2.5 inch strip, and you're putting a 1 inch in the corner? I don't really understand that. Are you just cutting it on the diagonal?
Oh, wait, for the weekend.
Okay. What is my day job? My husband and I we own an appliance repair company. And actually, I'll use that to lead into my big news. My big announcement is my husband and I are downsizing our business in the new year. And in our new location, I will have a classroom. So I will be able to offer classes, which you can attend. I'm hoping to get my color shop theory going and beginner classes, and the space will also be available for other teachers to rent or just to have sew days. So I look forward to this in the new year. I think February 1st might be a little bit early for us to start, but definitely by March 1st we'll be up and running. So I am so excited about this next chapter in our life. We are going to have so much fun, and hopefully I'll get to meet so many of you. Let me just see if there's just one more. I know a lot of people are upset that their questions are not answered on air. I try to answer as many as I can that I haven't repeated in previous Q&As. Some questions are just too big to answer in a Q&A. I need to do something physically with them, and some of the questions I use to trigger new video ideas. So videos that I have coming up in the future, my next one will, like after quilt. This is one that everybody is wanting. The after quilt is how you put your scraps all together and use them on your back. But as I'm working through the script, I realize that I need to make a video before that, because there's some foundations that you need. And as I work through that video, I found out that there's something more. So my next video is going to be on pillows, and my video after that is going to be on how to put orphan blocks together, and then my next video after that is after quilt.
So I apologize, November was a challenging month for me.
Snow arrived, I think, November 4th, and nobody here in Toronto was really quite ready for it, and I was one of them. And then the cold went right through the family, so I didn't make a lot of things in November. It was just a very busy month. But hopefully we're all back to health, and I know it's going to be busy with moving out of our old on my day job, moving out of my old location and moving into my new location. But hopefully I can keep a flow of these videos coming. So please be patient with me.
Kathy responded and clarified her question. She says, I sew the small square on the corner diagonal.
Okay. So how to keep it square. I find the easiest way, if you're finding that you're hit and miss on this one, the easiest way is just to make a larger square and sew that on, mark on your, these are the type of questions which are challenging to answer on in a Q&A. So you've got your bindings coming together like this, and then you're doing a diagonal with your square. So you want to make sure that your two pieces here are square. Square that up first, and then do your diagonal, and use a scant 1/4 inch so that you have a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, we are at the end of our Q&A. I want to just give a shout out to everybody that was in the Facebook group, the UFO Challenge. You are an amazing bunch of ladies. It was so great to get to know you, and we will be starting a
new UFO challenge in the new year.
My last video, I do this all the time. My video before was what you can do, hacks to use your cell phone, and my last one was 10 gifts that you should get for Christmas. So if you have people that buy for you for Christmas and they're looking for ideas, send them my last video. You can find me on
Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest
at Just Get It Done Quilts. I also have a website, Just Get It Done Quilts, which I'm going to be redoing for the new year. What I needed when I started is a lot different now. We have different, I have so many more patterns which are a little bit difficult to find in the current website, and get the videos hooked up properly, get the blog running properly, and then of course having some a space for booking the new space. So yeah, so thank you very much for showing up. Have a safe holiday. We're all very, very busy coming up. One of the best pieces of advice that came out of the UFO challenge is draw a line in the sand coming up to Christmas and the other holidays if you celebrate them, like this Saturday or next Saturday, and just make that a hard stop. If you haven't made the gift by now,
it's not going to be made for this year. It's going to be for next year.
So you're not stressed out on working up till Christmas Eve making gifts. And my own bit of advice is
delegate. I remember
was the year that I spread out all the duties. I gave my daughter the gifts, the wrap. My son did the stockings. My husband made the turkey,
and my other 2 sons had to clean and set the table.
And I sat back at Christmas dinner wondering why I enjoyed myself so much. And then I realized it was because I wasn't so stressed out doing everything. So please share the joy, and I'll see you next year.